During the First Age, Morgoth relied on overwhelming numbers in warfare, a strategy that ultimately failed. His lieutenant Sauron learned valuable lessons, and, having not squandered his strength as Morgoth had, became even more powerful than his master by the Second Age. Morgoth had permanently embodied himself in Arda, infusing the world with his essence, thus corrupting it into Morgoth's ring. Sauron mirrored this by empowering the One Ring. During the Second Age, he replicated Morgoth's strategy, allowing his enemies to grow stronger and unite, while engaging them openly on multiple fronts. This ultimately led to his defeat and the loss of the One Ring. Unlike Morgoth, Sauron was capable of altering his strategy. During the Third Age, Sauron understood his power and formulated a brilliant strategy, but his inability to comprehend his enemy ultimately cost him the war. After a millennium of reflection on Morgoth's and his own failures, Sauron developed a new strategy of divide and conquer. Instead of waging open war on multiple fronts, he opted for a more covert approach, patiently wearing down his enemies and revealing himself only at the moment of victory. To this end, Sauron would rely on proxy wars through his agents, third parties, and asymmetrical warfare. However, his strategic flexibility ultimately led to his downfall, as became the case with his hunt for the One Ring. By TA 1000, Sauron regained his physical form, casting a shadow over parts of Middle-earth to dominate the populace. Gondor, however, was at its zenith and in control of Mordor, compelling Sauron to look for a new base close to his enemies. He incited invasions by the Easterlings in Rhovanion and occupied the long-abandoned fortress of Amon Lanc in southern Greenwood. Disguising himself as the Necromancer, he poisoned the forest, forcing the Sylvan Elves to migrate northward thrice to Dol Guldur, where he established a hidden realm for his forces to grow. In TA 1300, as Sauron's power grew, evil proliferated across Middle-earth. The Nazgûl returned, dragons began to plague the Misty Mountains, and dark creatures swarmed Mirkwood. Sauron targeted Durin's folk for their past actions against him, dispatching Orcs to colonize the Misty Mountains and establish realms in Gundabad, Moria, Goblin Town, and the secret strongholds in the Hithaglir, contributing to a diaspora among Durin's folk. The Elves of Lindon and Rivendell had dwindled as their kin departed for the Undying Lands, leaving them incapable of offensive action. The blood of the Dunedain remained in Arnor, so Sauron sent his trusted lieutenant, the Witch King, to forge the proxy realm of Angmar and destroy the Dunedain. Meanwhile, he assailed Gondor and the Northmen from Dol Guldur through Easterling and Southron proxies, fostering coalitions like the Wainriders, Belchoth and Corsairs of Umbar to erode his enemy's strength throughout the Third Age. Sauron employed asymmetric warfare alongside proxy conflicts to weaken his enemies. He first cast a shadow over Greenwood the Great, infesting it with spiders and bats, which diminished the Sylvan Elves, thwarting their unity and forcing them into the isolated realms of Mirkwood and Lothlorien. Sauron then stoked civil unrest in Gondor, leading to the Kinstrife in TA 1432, which depleted the Dunedain population while importing Northmen from Rhovanion. This turmoil also cost Gondor numerous ships, which the rebels took to Umbar, forming the Corsairs who harassed Gondor for centuries. In TA 1635, Sauron unleashed a great plague from Rhûn, devastating the populations of men, and leading to the abandonment of cities and strongholds like Minas Ithil and the collapse of the joint garrison at Tharbad. Eriador suffered greatly, with the last Dunedain perishing in Cardolan, allowing the Witch King to populate it with Barrow-downs. By TA 2758, Sauron initiated the Long Winter, isolating Rohan and Gondor while Corsairs and Haradrim attacked the latter's coasts. Additionally, Wulf commanded the Dunlendings against the Rohirrim, and the Shire faced threats from the White Wolves. Through these calculated actions, Sauron crippled his enemies, leaving them reeling for centuries, depleting Dunedain bloodlines and fostering distrust among the Free Folk. Alongside Sauron's proxy wars, he formed unexpected but potent alliances that shifted the balance of power. In TA 1980, the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm inadvertently awakened a Balrog, which killed many, including King Durin VI. This calamity led to the expulsion of the Dwarves. Exploiting the opportunity, Sauron sent Orcs to occupy Khazad-dûm, renaming it Moria. The Balrog tolerated Sauron's presence, allowing Sauron to form a quasi-alliance with the Umayyad, who at least did not challenge Sauron's dominance. Later, the dragon Smaug expelled the Dwarves from Erebor and destroyed Dale, thus severing their communication with the Woodland Realm. Although no relationship seemed to exist, it was enough to raise concerns for Gandalf, who feared Sauron would form an alliance with Smaug. Regardless of a formal alliance, Smaug's occupation ended Sauron's strategy by further isolating the north and contributing to the Dwarven diaspora. Sauron likely dispatched the Corsairs of Umbar to assist Wulf in his war against the Rohirrim, and in doing so, made the leader of the Dunlendings into a valuable ally. Sauron also loosely allied with the Spider Queen Shelob after the abandonment of Minas Ithil. As he rebuilt Barad-dûr and expanded Mordor, Shelob made her lair at Torrich Ungol, providing a formidable guard over Cirith Ungol. Sauron tolerated her presence, even referring to her as his cat, and occasionally sending prisoners to her. His most profitable alliance, however, was with Saruman, who grew envious of Gandalf's influence. Seeking power for himself, Saruman discovered a Palantir in Isengard and was seduced by Sauron's promise of strength. By concealing the Orthanc stone and peering into it, he gradually formed an allegiance with Sauron to either claim the One Ring or become an equal lieutenant. Sauron manipulated Saruman into attacking Rohan and undermining the White Council, thereby cementing his influence across Middle-earth. Sauron's war strategy reaped dividends as his enemies became increasingly isolated and distrustful of each other. The population of men declined, the elves were departing in droves for the Undying Lands, and the dwarves appeared indifferent to the chaos surrounding them. It was not until the 20th century that Arnor and Gondor recognized that a singular malevolent force was orchestrating their decline. However, they misattributed this to a Nazgûl. In TA 2063, Gandalf investigated Dol Guldur, but Sauron managed to escape, concealing his identity. Had he maintained a patient approach, his enemies would have descended further into chaos, enabling him to deliver a masterstroke. However, unlike Morgoth, Sauron was capable of altering strategies, which ultimately proved detrimental. In TA 2460, Sauron returned to Dol Guldur with the new purpose of hunting for the One Ring. Initially believing the elves had destroyed it, he eventually realized that its destruction would mean he could not have regained his former power. This realization coincided with the One Ring revealing itself to a Store Hobbit named Smeagol 3 years later. Sauron feared that his enemies could use their power to shift the allegiances of his captains to them. He never once considered that his enemies would destroy the One Ring to defeat him. Finding the One Ring became his top priority, to the utmost detriment of his war strategy. Second to this, Sauron also aimed to gather the remaining rings of power and eliminate the line of Isildur. Unfortunately for him, the Wise concealed Aragorn's existence, leading Sauron to mistakenly believe one objective was met. His Nazgûl possessed the 9 Rings of Men, while 4 Dwarven rings were destroyed by dragons. That left 3 non-elven and the 3 elven rings. Sauron likely believed that these rings would amplify his power and assist in enslaving his foes. Sauron aimed first for the Gladden Fields, where Isildur fell, unleashing the Belchoth against Gondor's northern territory to clear the way for his agents to find the One Ring. However, this plan backfired spectacularly, as the Eotheod came to Gondor's aid, defeating the Belchoth at the Field of Celebrant. The Eotheod then formed an alliance with Gondor, establishing the Kingdom of Rohan. This turn of events thwarted Sauron's search for the ring, and drew attention towards Dol Guldur. In TA 2845, Sauron captured King Thrain II and tortured him for information on the last Dwarven ring, further intensifying the ring-hunting activity, prompting Gandalf to investigate Dol Guldur in TA 2851. Gandalf uncovered Thrain's imprisonment, and recognized Sauron's return as the Necromancer. However, when Gandalf urged the White Council to act, Saruman convinced them to hold off, as he was also secretly searching for the One Ring. Exploiting this respite, Sauron unleashed his Haradrim against Ithilien in TA 2885, and sent Uruk-hai in TA 2901, successfully enveloping Ithilien by TA 2954. However, Saruman soon grew anxious about Sauron locating the One Ring before him, and finally agreed to attack Dol Guldur in TA 2941. That year proved disastrous for Sauron. The White Council revealed his identity, forcing his retreat from Dol Guldur. Meanwhile, Smaug was slain, and Bolg led a calamitous attack against the Dwarves at Erebor, culminating in the Battle of 5 Armies, where the northern Orcs suffered the loss of 3/4 of their horde. These events revitalized the kingdoms of Erebor and Dale, renewing trade with the Woodland Realm, establishing a new threat to Sauron's north. Furthermore, because the Orcs of the Misty Mountains were recovering, the Beornings opened the high pass and ford of Carrick. By TA 3000, this allowed Erebor Dwarves to travel west, delivering news of Sauron. Now exposed, Sauron reoccupied Barad-dûr and was forced to declare himself openly by TA 2951, losing the element of surprise and initiative in his war. He tasked his lieutenants, the Witch King and Khamûl, to oversee Minas Morgul and Dol Guldur. This allowed him to focus on Gondor and the Sylvan Elves, while the Easterlings attacked Erebor and Dale from the east, stretching Sauron's forces across multiple fronts. His most immediate adversary, Steward Denethor, began utilizing the Arnor stone to glimpse into Mordor. Sauron failed to dominate him through the stone, but managed to instill despair in him. In TA 3000, Saruman used the Orthanc stone, allowing Sauron to manipulate him into an alliance. Saruman helped keep Rohan in check, further isolating Gondor. However, as new enemies coalesced, Sauron still feared one might claim the One Ring against him. In TA 3009, Sauron captured Gollum and discovered the One Ring was in the Shire, although he was unaware of its location and mistakenly assumed it lay by the Gladden River. After releasing Gollum in TA 3017, Aragorn soon recaptured him. Alarmed, Sauron rashly dispatched the Nazgûl to Osgiliath to both gauge Gondor's strength and divert suspicion from their true pursuit of the One Ring. The Nazgûl took Osgiliath by complete surprise, overwhelming eastern Osgiliath, but instead of capitalizing on this victory, Sauron abruptly broke off the assault and redirected the Nazgûl to search for the One Ring further west. Boromir later noted during the Council of Elrond that Gondor's defeat was attributed to a power he had never felt, emanating from a great black horseman. This clearly indicates the Witch King was better served commanding Mordor's forces against Gondor rather than hopelessly hunting for the One Ring. Then Sauron made another egregious error by sending a messenger to King Dain II, inquiring about a creature named Baggins in a place called the Shire, in exchange for 3 Dwarven rings. Dain stalled and prevaricated with Sauron while sending Gloin and his son Gimli to Elrond for counsel, exposing Sauron's intentions to the wise, who would then form the Fellowship of the Ring against him. By TA 3018, Sauron had gathered sufficient forces to secure ultimate victory in any conflict where the One Ring remained unclaimed. The Eldar and Dunedain were too few to challenge him. The Northmen in Dale, Rohan and the Upper Vales of Anduin were strong, but they remained divided and unable to unite. The Dwarves were preoccupied with mining, refusing to take any offensive action in the War for Middle-earth. The Witch King had decimated Arnor, while Durin's Bane inhabited Khazad-dûm, and the Easterlings were poised to defeat Dale and Erebor. Dol Guldur and the Orcs of the Misty Mountains threatened to cleanse the woodland realm of Lothlorien. Eriador, Lindon and Imladris were no longer significant concerns and could be dealt with later. Gondor was the only notable foe left, but it had been weakened by centuries of conflict against the Easterlings, Haradrim and Corsairs. Although Gondor could still withstand one significant assault, especially with Rohan's support, Saruman would delay Rohan from mobilizing. All chess pieces seemed poised for checkmate. However, Sauron's enemies recognized his crucial weakness, his fear of someone else seizing the One Ring. Unable to achieve victory on the battlefield, the Wise formed the Fellowship to destroy the ring, their only chance at success. Gandalf determined that the best way to assist Frodo's quest was to make Sauron believe Aragorn had emerged as a new Ring Lord. When Aragorn touched the Orthanc stone, revealing himself as the heir of Isildur and wielder of Andúril, Sauron was shocked. The Dark Lord had believed the line of Isildur was broken, and worse, it appeared that Aragorn had overthrown Saruman and taken the One Ring from Pippin. In a panic, Sauron ordered the Witch King to launch his long-planned assault on Gondor immediately, rather than wait for all preparations to be made, in the hopes of defeating his enemies before they could fully leverage the One Ring. At the same time, he commanded Dol Guldur and the Easterlings to initiate their full assault in the north, despite the lack of Nazgûl leadership and proper support from the Misty Mountains. This decision backfired massively. Dol Guldur and the Easterlings failed, and Sauron lost a significant portion of his army on the fields of Pelennor alongside his greatest lieutenant. Despite the hard-fought battles, the Free Folk had achieved only a Pyrrhic victory. Within Mordor, Sauron possessed enough strength to ultimately secure military triumph against all his enemies combined. All Sauron needed to do was whittle down his enemy safely behind his walls and wait for the time to deliver the killing blow. Best yet, all his forces were concentrated in Mordor, making it nearly impossible for anyone to destroy the One Ring by tossing it into Mount Doom. Aware of this, Gandalf orchestrated a daring final effort for ultimate victory. The host of the West marched upon Morannon, aiming to provide Frodo with the opportunity to destroy the One Ring. Even when Captain Shagrat reported an elvish intruder at Cirith Ungol, Sauron remained transfixed on the host of the West, convinced they carried the One Ring. Sauron fell directly into the trap, emptying Mordor of its forces, allowing Frodo to deliver the killing blow. Ultimately, Sauron had the tools and the means to win the many battles of the Third Age, yet his inability to understand his enemy ultimately cost him the war. More stories from Middle-earth are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.